Hey, everybody. Thanks for attending the first lecture of the Money Meets Medicine Personal Finance Lecture Series. Super excited to have everybody here. And I popped a poll up there for those of you that are here live. I know that some people watch this as a recording. And looks like of the few votes that we have, we got a range of people in training in terms of med school, residency, fellowship, or being an attending physician. So appreciate you popping in that vote as you come in. And super excited to chat with you today. So do me a favor and just type Y or yes in the chat box for those of you that are here. Just let me know that you're actually hearing my voice, because otherwise it's a pretty embarrassing talk when I find out that the microphone wasn't working. That's not typically ideal. All right, awesome. So yeah, we're going to talk about personal finance 101 today, and so it's going to be a lecture series. And as we go through the year, this is going to be predominantly a weekly series. I'll show up each Sunday at 2 p.m. Except on the occasions when have something going on like summer break with my kids. And you can expect these to go in order, and we'll kind of address different topics as we go. And so this time we're going to talk about personal finance 101, and so we can dive into this a little bit. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jimmy Turner. I am the founder of Money Meets Medicine and the physician philosopher, and super excited to chat with you about this topic today. Before we dive in, you might be wondering why I'm doing this, um, and so part of the reason why is because when I was in medical school as a fourth year medical student, I essentially had a let's say just a firm come in and chat with us as part of the medical school experience. And when I did this, I actually didn't really know anything about money at that time. Like, I wouldn't learn about personal finance until 5, 6, 7 years later. And so these people are talking about, student loans and investing, and that they can help me with all that. And I didn't really trust them. It felt a little slimy, to be honest with you. But I didn't, again, know anything about it. And so they're talking to us that day. I don't really trust these people. I get into residency, and it is at this time, a few years into residency, that the CEO of that firm gets thrown in jail for fraud. So this is GL Advisors, and they essentially, Daniel Thibault, you can see in that article there, gets thrown in jail for fraud. So, like, I had this pretty big distrust of the financial industry as I started in the personal finance space, and as I got further along, it was kind of borne out, and I started realizing that, hey, doctors want to learn about personal finance, and they want to learn about it from someone that they can trust. So that's why I created the physician philosopher. I created Money Meets Medicine, and actually, as we dive into this lecture series, I want to point you to a completely free resource that you can use to kind of go along with this. And actually, I'll provide some reading that you can do in preparation for some of these lectures. And one of the places that you can find that is if you go to moneymeetsmedicine.com. On that very first page, you'll see the Physician Philosopher's Guide to Personal Finance. It's actually a brand new second edition of my book. It's completely free. You put your name and your email address in there, and then it emails you a PDF and an ebook copy, actually, that you can read on a Kindle reader, if that's your thing, or on an iPad, or however you consume your content. It's got both formats. And I'll be referring to that during this lecture series in terms of reading that you can participate in to help kind of grow your knowledge as you go. So we are going to dive into this and talk about a few different things. You can expect these lectures to last, about 20 minutes, give or take, and you can feel free to ask questions in the chat box as we go along. And actually, this is my first YouTube live, so do me a solid, for those of you that are here right now. Is my screen flipped, or is this just me experiencing YouTube live on the other side? Can you actually read the words on the screen? Yeah, just type yes or no in that chat box. Just gonna make sure this is a YouTube live phenomenon and not me. You can read them. Great, because on my screen it is backwards. So what we're going to talk about today is personal finance 101. And we have to recognize that all of us bring our stories, our experiences with personal finance to the table when we talk about these topics. And this is why people say personal finance is personal, right? So when I went through bankruptcy as a kid, when I was 10 years old, and we got basically kicked out of where we were living, my dad lost his job as a nuclear engineer, and I ended up living with my grandparents. And to be honest with you, had they not been there, we would have been out on the streets. And so I've got an avid hatred of debt. So that's an example in my life of, my experience impacting my view on personal finance. That experience I had with that firm I mentioned shortly ago also impacted my view of the financial industry, if you will. Okay, and so you have to recognize that as we go through these talks, your view is going to be impacted by this. But as we dive in, these people on the slide, can anybody tell me who these people are? Toss this in the chat box here. So who's this person up here in the top right corner? Any guesses? All right, it's got Mike Tyson. Played against him on NES. Yeah, they had the boxing game. That was awesome. What about these other people? You guys recognize either one of these two? Right. So you got Michael Jackson, Nicolas Cage, and what about lastly? What about this one? What about this one in the middle? Does anybody know who that is? Yeah, we got Michael Jackson, and then Kim Bassinger is this one. Oftentimes people don't, for whatever reason, get her. But who's this one hanging out in the middle of the page? Does anybody know? There's usually at least one person that knows who this is. Might be a little delayed there. This is Ulysses S. Grant. He's a prior president, right? And so if I had to ask you what these people have in common, right? Someone is going to guess that these people are all really well known, right? They're famous people that all have the unfortunate history of going broke or bankrupt. They lost all of their money and or went into, a pretty financially bad situation. Okay. And so you kind of have to ask yourself, right? If you're this wealthy, in their day and age and this well known, like how does that happen, right? These people make a ton of income. They made a lot of money in their careers, whether it was as an entertainer, an actress, actor, athlete, whatever that president of the country, whatever that happened to have been. And part of the reason why is because wealth is not income. That's not what wealth is. Wealth is your net worth. That's the best surrogate for how wealthy you are. How much wealth do you have at your disposal to accomplish your goals when it comes to personal finance? And for those that are familiar, right, this is going to be a simple equations: assets minus debts. How much do you have that actually is worth something versus how much do you owe to other people? And if you're like me, when I started my personal finance journey, right, my net worth was like negative three, four, $500,000, and that's most doctors when you finish training, right? You go from medical school loans, and you have maybe a car loan, you have potentially a mortgage, and when you're starting your journey as an attending physician, most of our net worths are extremely negative. This isn't true for everybody, but it's an interesting phenomenon because when this happens, inevitably people, when they finish, they'll be like, well, I want to live the physician life, just like the actresses and entertainers. They have the income, it's coming in. And so now they've got this desire to live a life despite having this very negative net worth. And so there is a very famous example of this, right? So, after college, even after being slightly educated, spent $1 million in a day, right? And for those of you that know the story, this is Shaq, right? So Shaq, he basically gets his giant signing bonus. And after he gets his signing bonus, Shaq goes to a Mercedes dealership, buys a car, drives it home, and his mom's like, hey, where's mine? Right. And the dad does the same thing. And then there's a house involved. He basically spent his entire signing bonus in a single day. Right. So this is not uncommon. And it's honestly the same phenomenon that happens with physicians. We'll talk a little bit about that next week. But money's not complicated, right? You got to earn a good paycheck. You got to spend less than you earn. You got to, build wealth. So increase your assets, get rid of your debts, and then let your money earn money for you, right? And so it's not hard, right? It's really simple. It really boils down to that. But if you can, in the chat box, tell me, in the world of medicine, if money is so easy, why do so many high income earners go broke? What leads to this phenomenon that Michael Jackson and Kim Bassinger and Ulysses S. Grant and doctors often experience, right? So toss it in the chat box there and let me know some reasons why you think that this happens. All right, so we got spending. It's a good one. Why else? Yeah, so spending's a big one, right? People spend more than they earn. So lifestyle creep, which in the doctor world is really kind of lifestyle explosion when you have that sudden jump in pay. That's a big one. Something that other people will mention sometimes is you're typing these in the chat box, right? Is that money is a taboo topic, right? And so people feel uncomfortable talking about these topics because they don't know who to ask, they don't know who to talk to. That is one of the reasons that we're doing this. You can literally ask me anything in the chat box. I'm an extremely transparent person, happy to answer any questions because I didn't know who to ask when I was there, right? Yeah, someone in the family gets sick, you might have things come up, right? That might increase your spending. Poor investment choices, right? And so, investment choices can be really bad. And honestly, part of that comes from one of the biggest causes, which is financial literacy, right? So a lot of people in medicine don't have access to personal finance education. And so I'm going to be honest with you, this one for me was the biggest one. And the reason why was because I didn't have an opportunity to ask anybody. I know absolutely nothing about money all the way through med school, all the way through residency, basically halfway into my fellowship when I started diving into this stuff. Being a teacher and educator, I'm still in academics. So I still work part time as an anesthesiologist in North Carolina at Wake Forest. Go Deeks, big Wake Forest fan. And so when I am going through this process, I started learning about this and I started teaching other people. And there's this huge desire. People, I mean, it's why people are showing up live, and this will just continue to grow each week. People want to learn about this, but it's not offered in our medical education, right? So this is part of the reason why it's complicated to people. They don't know anything about it. They spend more than they earn. They have this lifestyle explosion, and there's a whole host of other things. But when you look into the literature on this, right? Me being an academic, I'm of course gonna touch on this before we talk about personal finance specifically, but people in medicine, doctors, expect to retire by the age of 60, but then actual retirement is closer to 69. Okay. And so this is actually 3 years later than the general public. All right. Systematic review. And some people might say, well, maybe it's because doctors just love doing what they do. Now, if you're a physician listening to this, there's a 60% chance that you don't love what you do. I hope, you know, everyone listening is in the 40% or what it may be that does. But Comp Health actually did a survey on this and asked people like, hey, if you're going to be practicing medicine after the age of 65, why are you doing that? Like, why are you practicing medicine after that? And you'll see that 50% of doctors said that they were going to practice after the age of 65 because they wanted to maintain their lifestyle. So said differently, right? People couldn't maintain their lifestyle if they retired. So 50% of the doctors in this study that were practicing past that age that they anticipated retiring were doing so because they couldn't afford to retire. All right. So this is my paycheck, one of my paychecks. And I apologize. I know this is super blurry, but I I was in school back in the Stone Ages when PDFs didn't copy over very well. This is one of my paychecks as a resident. I did my residency fellowship, actually medical school residency fellowship all at Wake, stayed on there as faculty. And, my net pay is hiding over here in the corner. But, basically, if you look at the current PGY1 pay, according to double AMC in terms of average, it comes out to about $59,000, which is about $3,500 a month. Okay. So that's give or take what most people are taking home as a resident. This is one of my paychecks as an attending physician. And you can see that the number on the slide is quite different, right? So I went from earning $3,500 a month to earning about $25,000 a month. And in this process, you might look at that number and be like, wow, look at that. That's a huge jump in pay. And it is, right? It is a large jump from what I was making as a resident. But you look at that $25,000 number that I'm earning over here, and then this is kind of how I picture most physicians when they finish, right? They're like, I finally made it. They're like, on the mountaintop, they got their arms in the air, like, freedom, before they remember that negative $500,000 net worth. But this is my take home, right? So I told you that my pre-tax pay is $25,000, right? And then my post-tax pay, you can do the math, is substantially less than that, right? So pre-tax $25,000, post-tax 13,500, and that gives us a difference of $11,500. And so when you get this first paycheck and you're expecting it to be $25,000, and it turns out it's like half of that, naturally this kind of starts to ask some questions like, where did all the money go? Well, pay a lot more in taxes, right? So $6,500, about 28% went to taxes. And then there's investing in insurance. We're going to go through an entire investing lecture series, later on in this curriculum. And so you can, we'll talk about why I'm saving the amount of money that I'm saving in this paycheck, in addition to, other savings, and how we're going to get to financial independence by a certain age. And that dictates how much we need to save each year. I'll talk you through the math and the whole 9 yards. But suffice it to say, when it comes out to taxes, insurance, and investing, about $11,500 is removed from my paycheck. before I ever take it home. And so this is the main thing that I want to talk about today, right? So we're going to talk about the what and the how in this lecture series. We're going to line it all out. We'll talk about student loans. We'll talk about, cash flow, paying off debt versus investing, the order in which to do that. We'll talk about investing itself. We'll talk about working with financial industry, all of the what and the how of personal finance. We're going to cover it all. And if you have topics you want me to cover, please toss them in the chat box or you can email me at jimmy@moneymeetsmedicine.com. I want this to be helpful for people, right? But if we're going to talk about the what and the how, the very first thing that we have to talk about is the why. Why are we doing these things? Why am I saving, $75,000 a year that I could be taking home and spending for my family and for me, right? So I'm married. I've got 3 kids. They are, I've got a middle schooler now, 7th grader, and down to a 7-year-old in first grade. And so, like, why not take the money home? Well, let's dive into this. So I'm going to ask you some questions here, right? And then we are going to chat about them. So this is an adaptation from something called the Kinder questions. So that's Kinder. I know it looks like kinder, but it's Kinder. And so these are adaptations from that. So we're going to read this. And in the chat box, I actually want you to tell me what you think about this, right? So imagine you've suddenly experienced the financial freedom that you deserve. So in other words, you've won the lottery. You've got $5 billion, some infinite amount of money that you can imagine. You have enough money saved to basically create passive income for the rest of your life. Um, Knowing this, what would you spend your time doing? Who would you spend it with? Maybe a big question is, would you still practice medicine? I will not make you answer that live on YouTube. If this was a private course, I can tell you that honestly, when I ask this question, typically, I don't know, a significant portion say, well, if I was financially independent, to be honest with you, I don't know. I might not. But we're going to design your ideal life. So if you had an infinite amount of money, what would you spend your time doing? Right? What would you spend that money on? So toss some ideas here in the chat box. Yeah, and Christina pointed out earlier that the med schools just kind of keep offering money, and that's certainly part of the issue, right? The 6 to 8% increase in inflation each year is kind of nonstop. All right, so Laura said travel with family, right? So we're going to travel. What else? What else are we spending our money on? We have an infinite amount of money. Travel being a big one, it looks like. Tossing the other stuff in the chat box. What else might you spend? Tesla fleet. All right, I'll put down Tesla. That's fine. Get to scratch golfing. So let's just toss that under maybe hobbies. And I imagine, Cameron, if you're playing golf, you're probably doing that with friends, maybe. All right. Time with family, education. So family, education. Forgot a letter there. I can't spell, by the way, so make fun of me. It's okay. Buy all the dogs from the shelter, right? So let's just call that charity, right? Things that you care about, hobbies, travel, investing in health. Yeah, so exercise, right? Maybe nutrition, philanthropy. Let's toss that with our charity, right? Time for me, writing, reading. Yeah, so hobbies, golf, reading. So you'll start to kind of see this here, right? Like just get a sense for, what people are talking about in terms of things that they would want to do in this situation, right? And let's move on to the second question. So the second question, if you knew that you were to basically meet an early demise, right? So let's say that you're going to die, right? Next 5 to 10 years. It could be the first day of year 5 or the last day of year 10. You don't know. And in this situation, you are no longer financially independent. You do not have an infinite amount of money. Let's just say that you have the amount of money that you have right now. Are there things that you would start doing today that maybe you're waiting on, or things that you would stop doing, right? How do your current priorities change in light of that experience? If you knew that you were going to die day 1 of year 5 to sometime between that and the last day of year 10, what would you do with your time right now? Toss some more ideas in the chat box. I saw work part-time earlier too. I missed that one, but I'm gonna toss that one in here because I'm imagining that some people will do the same thing. All right, more effort into health. Oops. So health, wellness. We got experiences again. Stop focusing on what others think of me. You know what? I'm not gonna lie, Manuel. My last 2 years, one of the biggest goals that I've had actually, and I realize that I'm not blocking what I'm writing down. One of the, biggest goals that I've had is honestly to stop caring what people think, right? So everybody I know told me, "Hey, you're crazy to offer a free personal finance lecture series, right? Like, you're taking your time. Why would you do that? You could sell this stuff to medical schools and makes money. And like at the end of the day, like 2024 for me is the year of financial literacy, and I want to help as many people as I can. And that might make me crazy, but I honestly don't care what people think anymore. So that was a big one for me as well. All right, so we got volunteer. Let's go with charity again, right? Travel, focus on spirituality. I love it, right? Some more travel, work part time. I've already done it. Left to take care of my sister battling cancer. Family first, work later. I love that, Christina. I'm sorry that your sister's going through that, but I think that's awesome that you're there for her. Um, yeah, so you're going to start seeing, right? Like there are some similar things, right? Part time, maybe work, health, wellness, focus, experiences, volunteers, charity, traveling, right? And these experiences and travel, I can tell you, are typically going to be with friends and family. And in fact, other people in the chat box have already mentioned that that's what they would do. So now let's look at the third question here, and let's just say you got admitted to the ICU. You're septic shock. You know you're going to die in the next 24 hours, right? This is going to be a thing. You're going to die in the next 24 hours. Knowing this information, looking back on your life, what are you really glad that you accomplished? What are you really glad that you did? What would you regret not having done, right? So maybe let's break this up into like things that we are glad that we did, right? And maybe things that we regret we haven't done or have done. Um, what do you think? So if we talk about this, what are some things that you're glad that you've done? Things that we think about your legacy, things that looking back, you do it again. You wouldn't change a thing, right? What are some things that you're glad that you did, knowing that you're going to die in the next 24 hours? You just got admitted to the ICU, septic shock. What are some things that you're glad that you did? Kids. All right. Kids again. Times two. Changed lives. As a pediatrician, helped kids get better. Yeah, so patience, impact, right, on changing lives. Regret spending too much time climbing the ladder, right? So let's just say accolades, ladder, chasing after accolades. Yeah. Helped others. So some other things that we're glad that we did, right? Helped other people. Glad that I was able to help my patients, help my community, right? Regret missing kids' activities. Yeah. So, kids stuff. T-ball games, recitals. That's honestly the 100% sole reason that I went part-time. And I honestly save less money now, and we'll talk about that again in the investing lectures, as a way of coast fire. Got an episode coming out on Money Meets Medicine, the podcast, about that topic with Justin. But that's why I do it, is because I wanna be there for my kids' stuff. Um, After going through an exercise like this kinda helped me. Right. So you start seeing some themes, right? So if we look back at these questions, right, and I asked you, what would you do if you had an infinite amount of money? And people were like, travel. They're going to spend time with family. They're going to give to charity and philanthropy, which let's just say, is people, right? Exercise, nutrition. So that's still a person. That's you. You're focusing on you. And then you go to this next one, and people are like, oh, well, I want to focus on me again in terms of health and nutrition. I want to travel, give to charity with friends and family, spirituality, right? And I ask you, hey, you're going to die. And like, what are you really glad that you did? And you're like, well, kids, right? I took care of patients. I helped others, community. You're going to notice that 100% of the answers that you're giving outside of the Tesla fleet, there was a Tesla fleet in there. So I got to, we got to acknowledge the one thing over there. That said, you're going to notice that all of these things have something in common, which is spending time with other people, right? Friends, family, loved ones, patients, charitable, opportunities to help other people. And when you think about that, outside of the Tesla comment, which may have been written in jest. You didn't write down doctor house, right? You didn't write down private school for the kids. Like you didn't write down, super fast car. Um, that didn't show up here, and yet that's honestly, when we talk about the problems that physicians have, and honestly, Americans, just people in general, they spend more than they earn. And this is what causes a fundamental gap and an inability to create the cash flow you need to invest and pay down debt and build your wealth. And so when you step back and you think about these things, the things that are important to us, right? When we have this big picture look on life, the why, right? So that we can talk about the what and the how later, but the why is for friends, it's for family, it's for building a legacy, right? It's for spending time with kids or giving to things that are important to us, charitable opportunities to help other people or our community. And when you think about your efforts, your talents, your finances, your focus, your spending habits, they should reflect that big why, right? That bigger purpose or mission that you have for your life. And yet, financially, that's often not the case. And so, as we dive into the rest of this lecture series, and as you possibly put some questions in the chat box here, if you should have some, happy to do a little Q&A at the end of lectures as we have these. I want you to remember your why. I want you to go through this exercise, and what I really encourage people to do, to be honest with you, is to go through this exercise by yourself, right? So you can look back at, these questions. This obviously will be recorded on YouTube, but look back at question 1, right? I want you to write down your answers. Maybe you didn't want to share them publicly. That's fine. Write down question number 2. Write down question 3. And what I want you to do is, if you're in a committed relationship, I actually want you or your partner to do the same thing. Do it separately. And then what I tell people is have what's called a know your why dinner. And, get your favorite beverage of choice, whether that might be, wine or an IPA, or it might be, water or soda, whatever it happens to be. And sit down and go through these two things together, right? Because one of the things, and again, another topic we'll have, in this curriculum at some point, is getting on the same page as your spouse or your partner, financially. And the best way that I know to do that is actually to not talk about money. It's to talk about, hey, this is my why. This is your why. This is where we're going. And let's figure out a way to create a path to get to that goal. Before you focus on the what and the how of personal finance, you need to focus on the why. Okay. So I hope this exercise is super helpful for you. And as remember this, just remember, I think this is a great quote by Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money. I actually normally have this book somewhere around me. I don't see it at the moment, but a fantastic book. If you want to, pretty easy read that talks about money, talks about behavioral finance, the psychology of money. It is really, really good. And what he says here is in my opinion, very true. Money's greatest intrinsic value is its ability to give you control over your time. And someone has said it differently in terms of, the purpose of money is to allow you to do what you want, when you want, with the people you want, right? That is the purpose of money, right? So I want every physician, and honestly any medical professional, to be able to practice medicine because they want to and not because they have to, due to financial constraints. And so as we dive into this, don't forget, to go over to Money Meets Medicine and to download that book. That's there, free copy. Share it with anybody, friends, family. It is there for you. And then if you want to, for next week's lecture, just read through the first chapter, kind of the introductory portion, get a sense for what that's about, what my teaching style is about, why we're doing this, and you can read that. If you have questions, Jimmy at moneymeetsmedicine.com is the best way to get a hold of me. And I'll hang around for 20 or 30 seconds to see if you have any questions in the chat box for today. Go through that series of questions for yourself, write down the answers. It'll be pretty amazing to you when you look back 2, 3, 5 years from now. And honestly, if you go through it with a partner or best friend, someone in your life that is important to you, to go through those things and figure out what is the why behind all of the financial things that we're going to discuss in future lectures. So, all right. I don't see any questions at this time. So if you have questions that you want to talk about offline, shoot me those questions, Jimmy at moneymeetsmedicine.com. Happy to chat about them there, and maybe even introduce an office hours once a month to answer the questions that I get so that everyone else can learn and grow from those questions as well. All right. I'll be seeing you next week, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, and we will dive into the next lecture in the Personal Finance 101 series. Appreciate all you coming live, those of you did, and for those watching the recording, can't wait to see you live next time. Cheers.